everyone, and welcome to blog 41 of Tackle the Feelings Before the Behaviour. And today's blog is called Understanding Anxiety. And I've taken a bit of a time to get the next blog out, and the reason for that is actually because I wanted to do this blog on anxiety. And this is something I really want to do justice to because it's very close to my heart. It's something that I struggle with and have struggled with. And it's an ongoing process for a lot of people, whether you have a disorder in anxiety, whether you're a highly stressed person, whether you have actual stressful events that are getting you down, overwhelming you, whether you're in situations where you've got a lot of lower self-esteem and you feel a lot of jealousy and comparing yourself to other people. These all come from that core emotion, fear. And anxiety comes from the core emotion, fear. And so I've sort of jotted down a few things that I wanted to say today, but the truth is I think I'm just going to talk. I want to just talk about anxiety and what it is from my perspective, without all the jargon and all the lists of symptoms. I want to talk about how anxiety fits in with the emotional system and what we need to do with it. Talk a bit about anxiety in children, because that's a lot of you have come on here to get help with children and emotionally regulating your children, and then what you can do for it, and a bit about my healing journey. So that's quite a bit that I want to cram pack in here. So forgive me if I don't cover all of it properly, or I need to make a few blogs. We'll see how I go. So the first thing I want to do is explain anxiety. And anxiety is, so most of you know anxiety and depression as two mental illnesses or mental health disorders that are pretty common. Sorry. So anxiety is probably more common in that a lot of people around you are experiencing it, and people don't really talk about it because living with a high level of stress in this day and age is considered pretty normal. And that's the sad thing. And a lot of the time, depending where you're living, I come from a third world country or developing country, South Africa, where there is a lot of very real stress. There is a lot of trauma. There is a lot of hypervigilance, post-traumatic stress, crime. So you're living on the edge. You're living in a state of anxiety, and it's pretty important for survival to have a certain level of that when you're not living in a physically safe place. And I can't imagine what it's like for people in Syria and countries fleeing extreme war and terrorism and all of that kind of thing. I can imagine that that's very healthy and protective anxiety. But what anxiety disorder is, what the illness of anxiety is when you've developed this way of being unsafe in the world since childhood. I believe that anxiety stems from childhood. It stems from underregulated fear. It stems from a number of things. My job is working with parents, specifically in parenting as a therapist, and sometimes a family counselor, sometimes just an individual counselor. But my main role in my job, my day job, is to work with parents and families and try and intervene. I work with under 5 years old kids in the family, because we know that those first 5 years with children are pivotal. It's those formative years. A lot happens. And in those first 5 years, for us all, we experience a lot of anxiety. The reason for this is that in the first 3 years of our life, our brains are growing at the fastest they will ever grow in our whole lives. Those first 3 years, we are learning so much. The first couple of years, the years past that even, we are learning left, right, and center. We are modeling our environments and the people in them. So we're modeling things like our culture and our values and what to do when we're upset, when we're sad, when we're lonely, when we're scared. We have a certain amount of instincts that'll call out even from babies. They'll cry when they're upset and scared, and they are scared. you will find that with babies, they don't start off crying a lot of the time. They'll start being restless, and it'll go on. And if their needs aren't met, if they're hungry and you're busy and you're getting to it, but you can't quite get to a place where you can feed the child, you'll find those cries get louder and louder and louder. That is because the child is actually developing anxiety. And it's a healthy anxiety, it's a survival anxiety, because it is just like a pressure gauge. If I don't get fed, I will die. So we all know that. Inherently, we all know that. If we don't have our primary caregivers, our parents, or those people looking after us in those first 5, or even I would say even 10 years of our lives, we would die. Maybe not so much 10 years, but for the most part, we need so much from our caregivers, and it's very difficult to always get those needs met. And the more I work in this role, and the more I work on my own personal journey with anxiety and healing my trauma, I've got grief, I've got heaps of things that I need to work on in my life. As I look at that, I realize just how difficult it is to have met my emotional needs when my mother's emotional needs weren't met, and my grandmother's emotional needs weren't met, and my father as well. And it's that generational pattern of not knowing and doing the best that you can, and coming to parenting or a new relationship or something with your own trauma, your unhealed trauma. And anxiety is a big part of that for a lot of people, where you don't have that feeling of safety in the world. You don't have that inner peace. So the way I see anxiety, the way I experience it, is it's almost like an inability to let go. It's those thoughts running round and round in your head, overplaying, overthinking everything, thinking again and again what you could have said, what you wanted to say to people, belittling yourself for the things that you did do, feeling really angry a lot of the time. A large part of anxiety is a need to find control. And that is because we feel so out of control inside ourselves that we need, a lot of us that experience anxiety need to find that control in our external environments. And it presents itself in different ways. Some people need to clean and keep things a certain way. Some people create systems and lists and need to do things in certain ways. Some people get really bossy and controlling with their partners or their children. Some people become really overbearing and worrisome and can't let you go, bubble wrapping you. You hear of helicopter parents. That's usually when the parent is very anxious themselves, and they can't live with the discomfort of something happening to their loved one. So they try and minimize that discomfort, that pain, that hardship for their loved one. They try to control the situation. So we try to gain control in many different ways. I like to find control in a number of ways. Sometimes I don't realize I'm doing it. A lot of the time I like to create it in my environment. So I like to know where things are. I like to sort of get things cleaned and organized. I like to label things. I like to use color so things stand out to me. If I'm particularly stressed at work, I spend that last 15 minutes of the day really doing, what do I still need to do? Getting my to-do list going, because otherwise I'll struggle to let go in the evening. So you develop your systems with anxiety. Anxiety is also an incredibly, incredibly physical illness when it's a disorder. And just in general, stress, your immune system goes right down. We often, and especially children, feel that anxiety in our stomachs. We have stomach problems, IBS, we have bloating and gas, we have stomach cramps, all sorts of things, butterflies in the stomach, just feeling queasy, feeling real sense of dread. We get skin rashes with anxiety, backaches, headaches, all sorts of things. So anxiety is very physical, because I believe that just that tension, that constant tension, your muscles are often tense. You're always ready to fight or flight, that adrenaline response. You're in a state of tension. You can't relax. So anxiety, you just can't relax. You struggle to bring yourself down into a state of relaxing. You would have shallow breathing. You would just be heart rate going, accelerating, all that type of thing. Anxiety is just very restless. It's a very restless feeling, and it's exhausting. A large part of anxiety for me is avoidance. So for me, I feel like I get so drained with anxiety. I get really, sometimes I want to withdraw because it's just too much. I don't want to put myself into any more stimulus. I want to recharge my batteries because it's all been saturating for me. So what I will do is I will often avoid and withdraw and sort of push my emails and my phone calls aside, screen my calls, stay at home in my pajamas, take a day if I need a day at work, all those types of things. I have to do that because I need that time to recharge my batteries. So the core emotion in anxiety, and now there's a lot more I could explain in this disorder, but I hope this just gets you going. The core emotion being fear. So if you think of fear, you think of all the associated emotions with fear. You're going to need to create emotional safety for yourself when you are anxious. You're also going to need to calm yourself down out of that fight or flight state because you're not rational. You're set up in a fight and flight state with adrenaline to get yourself the hell out of that dangerous situation. The problem with anxiety is these are associated feelings of the original trauma. Often there is no real threat. It is perceived. We just develop a lot of fears, and as children, when we have these fears and we're not attended to in the way that we needed to be attended to, intentionally or unintentionally, it happened. Or our parents were anxious and we learned that this is the way to be in the world. Whatever the case may be, we've got anxiety. We need to create that emotional safety. We need to do some reparenting work. We need to put things in place for ourselves to be able to calm down, to be able to ground ourselves and start the day on a fresh, calm, peaceful level. So whether you're like me and you like to use mindfulness for that meditation, I'll do a 10 to 20 minute meditation every morning. I go on YouTube. I love YouTube for this, and find some guided meditation because it helps me to focus. I like to journal write sometimes, but I don't like to put pressure on myself to do that. I like to work on the feelings and the triggers that come up for me. I see a therapist. I like to do that for my own work as a practitioner, but in my personal life, I find it so important to have that person, that trusting environment for myself. I also do things to nurture and self-care. And that's something that's a work in progress because often when we're anxious, we're quite self-punishing. We don't feel we have the time, or we can't actually relax. Having a nice bath in salts, Himalayan pink salts, or bubble bath or something lovely like that, often sometimes can really feel quite difficult because we are struggling to relax, or it just feels like I need to self-care and that's another thing on my to-do list. So this is just a starter blog on anxiety, and I just would like you all to have some hope and faith that if you are struggling with this disorder, you are not alone. I see this is the most common thing I see in my work in both children and adults at the moment. I see it so much. I see a lot of people really wanting that peace but not knowing how to get there. And I think a large part of that is to understand that what you are experiencing is anxiety. And that anxiety needs you to reassure it. Anxiety needs you to create emotional safety. Whatever that looks like for yourself, anxiety needs you to contain the situation, to find a way to bring that containment. So whether that's bring things in, just reining everything in. So I hope that's been helpful. I will speak a bit more about emotional safety in the future as well. Have a great week. Bye.